Next up, let's talk about the sea-label drones here in the UK, and more specifically, what could actually happen next. We've all been absorbing the news that we'll not be getting the full use out of sea-label drones in the UK, and that they will effectively be legacy drones. This news was announced here on the Geeksvana live show, including news that the Department for Transport had confirmed an extension to the transition period to January 2026. But what could happen next? As we know, the CAA recommended, along with the transitional extension, that there should be a review of the sea-label system itself to see if they are the best fit for the UK. So what does that mean they could be replaced with, or will they even be replaced? One of the many posts and comments that I've seen, and the people that have been active on LinkedIn over the weekend, appeared from Callum Holland, who is the transformation lead for RPAS and AAM over at the UK CAA. Callum was actually the former RPAS policy specialist before he was promoted into that position. Now, I bring Callum up for two reasons. Firstly, because of our interview a few months ago here on the Geeksvana channel, where we discussed the review into sea-label drones, because even at that point we knew that it was probably coming down the line. And here's an interesting clip from that one, which I think is quite salient at the moment. Things in the recommendations which would be good just to take a sort of deeper dive on, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And the first one is, what in the CAA policy team view does re-evaluation of class marking scheme look like and evolve with? What kind of potential outcomes do you expect from that as well? So, because of course you've said that you want to reevaluate it, and that's sort of pricked quite a few ears in the industry, especially to say, okay, well, what's happening there? What in the policy team's view does that actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it says on the tin. As part of this consultation, we haven't just listened to the feedback in terms of what's relevant to this specific task, this extension. We've listened to the feedback for what the community is generally saying, and also our own internal expertise and what industry more generally is telling us. And we think now, as a result of departing the European Union and having this legislative framework that we have taken control of ourselves, there is scope to see if there's opportunity to improve it for the United Kingdom alone. And that's exactly it. It's an exercise that hasn't yet been done. We're only a year or two into this new framework, and we've seen it as an opportunity to go, right, let's stop, let's reflect. Is this the right thing for the community? If it is, what does it look like? If it isn't, what needs to be done differently? That addresses the industry's concerns, the community's concerns, but also the safety concerns as well. So at the moment, it's nothing more than that.
Okay, excellent. And the potential outcomes from that kind of thing. I mean, could we see a situation where we have a completely different system to EASA, so that, for instance, it doesn't actually matter what C marking it has on the drone, that it's everything under 800 grams is a C2, or this is that. Is every outcome possible?
Yeah, it would be wrong during the discovery phase to take any potential outcome off the table immediately. So every outcome is on the table, up for discussion, and there'll be consultations in the future on this, but every option is currently being considered.
So that's pretty interesting. Bear in mind that interview was back in June. Looking back now from our current position, and the second reason I mentioned Callum tonight is actually from his answers on LinkedIn, where he was answering another user in terms of his thoughts about what could happen. And I will stress that he stressed in his comments that these were his own thoughts completely and shouldn't be seen as anything associated with the CAA, as he's commenting on his personal profile on LinkedIn. He put forward 4 potential options that I think are pretty interesting and are possible scenario candidates for what could happen here in the UK. These options are: 1, completely remove product standards from the open category; 2, create UK specific manufacturing standards; 3, align with the EU manufacturing standards; 4, utilise a different mechanism other than product standards to demonstrate the robustness of an aircraft flown in the open category. And he then states that we will, of course, be running a consultation on this piece of work at some point, more to follow. So I think of those 4 points, I would personally say the second one, to create specific standards for the UK would be the toughest to achieve. Although we've got a strong hobby and an ever-growing commercial sector, I'm personally not convinced that many drone manufacturers would actually change the design of their drones to suit a specific UK set of guidelines. Perhaps DJI and Autel could, but I'm not sure they would, and I wonder if smaller manufacturers could even necessarily afford it. Now, option one there, removing standards completely, is interesting. Perhaps we'd see something like a straight weight restriction for different A1, A2, A3 airspace categories. I mean, that could work. That would also stop older aircraft becoming legacy and becoming defunct, etc. So people wouldn't have to rush out and buy a C-label drone. So I could see options from that point of view. Option three would be the most straightforward, of course, to align with the EU standards and would allow those already marked drones here in the UK, although that still needs some work in terms of how it would actually happen. And option four does make me a little bit nervous from the point of view of the thought of there being a different mechanism concerns me in terms of making this simple and easy to follow for all levels, including new consumers coming into the hobby or businesses, frankly, looking to use drones for the first time. Because a big increase in drone use that's coming is, of course, businesses that aren't drone experts wanting to facilitate different things that they do, so replacing risk at height and that type of thing, etc., with drones. And it needs to be simple for people to understand, in my opinion. Now, during that live show where I played Callum's interview, I also made this statement, which again was back in June, which again I think probably has some sort of, it rings true certainly at the moment as well. This is a short one. So I brought up at the end was in terms of removing the C-label system from the drone code, which I personally think is quite important. It needs to happen, in my opinion, quite soon, as the indefinite delay to the system is confirmed by the DFT and Parliament. So as soon as we have that in place, I think we need to remove that from the drone code, frankly. The confusion it already brings is bad enough. I already have lots of people asking me, what is a C-label, is this, is that, etc. But we could easily see a situation where the EASA states release their C-label drone system sooner than the UK. So there is no intended EASA review of C-label drones. They've set a new firm date for their C-labels to be in place. So we really obviously want to avoid a situation where the UK drone code states you can use C-label drones. Such drones get released for the European market for EASA states, but you actually can't use those here in the UK. So that situation would obviously be very confusing for consumers. I'm sure the CAA will make some changes before that happens. But until we have more certainty, I don't think there should be any more mention of it in the drone code at all, frankly. And I feel like I remain that way, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks when the law is changed in terms of the C1 drone, the EU C1 drone use in the UK, to see if there are any major changes to the drone code and the flyer ID. Of course, there's not much point people learning all about C-class labels if they're not going to be using them for several years, if at all. Frankly, it's a different thing when we were certain that the C-label system was where we were heading. And apologies for playing a stream within a stream there. I hope I didn't open up any paradoxes. And I am aware the wheels can turn slowly and we need to get things cleared by government, etc. But I would appeal again some months later that we need a clean-up of the drone code to remove the mention of the C-labels from the main text and the flyer ID as soon as possible. It's now created confusion, particularly for consumers. And I'm concerned that people will just start ignoring the rules from straight confusion, frankly. We've got a situation where a lot of work has been done by a lot of people to explain these rules and to get people on side and to get people understanding them enough to feel comfortable. And then we're kind of having the rug pulled out from under us a little bit, I feel. And I feel like the cleanup of the drone code, let's get it exactly what you can and cannot do, no future stuff in there or anything else like that. Let's make it how it is. We can update that thing often, and if we need to update it in a year or if it does take the full 3 years, etc., to get the new system, then we'll do that. But let's have it exactly as we need it, frankly. And as Callum mentions in his post, there will be a public consultation on all of this, so expect that will be pretty big news moving forward, and it will certainly be something we'll keep you up to date with here on Geeksvana. So do remember to subscribe if you are not already. If you're watching this show and are not already subscribed, then please do so for those updates.